Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Let's begin with prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Merciful God, we thank you for the gift of your church, especially Calvary Parish. Keep us mindful of our role of stewardship in this place, in this community. In your name we pray. Amen. So thank you for coming. We have cutting-edge technology this morning and an overhead projector, but it actually works very well for what we need it to do. Today, I'd like us to consider an idea that I have been thinking about for at least 15 years, going on 20. And that idea is when you start to see some of the facts and figures, membership, attendance, pledging, and so on in the Episcopal Church, it does not take an economist to see the trend in the direction it's going. I've known about this, as a lot of people have, for a long time, and I think that Calvary Church has had a very significant leadership role in the Diocese of Pittsburgh for a long, long time, and in a different way, in some similar ways, a leadership role in the life of the Episcopal Church. I don't think that's going to diminish. I think the leadership role, both in the diocese and even to a degree nationally, will increase. I believe it will change, but we have something here, a treasure at Calvary Church, the community, the building, the ministries, all of it, that very few other places have. You have the handouts in front of you. Anybody have this blue one here? It's two-sided, by the way. So, do you notice the pattern? In the Episcopal Church's membership, for probably 15, 20 years, a number of people who study the church. There was this great organization called the Alban Institute. They were based out of Washington, D.C., right next to the National Cathedral. They have ceased to exist as the organization they were. They still have consultants, but from really the 70s on, they published a lot of books and a lot of studies analyzing not just the Episcopal Church, but Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, and so on. They have been, they've done the seminal work at looking at membership, attendance, trends, and what we might do about it. Anybody know what happened to them? They ceased to exist. They're a publishing house. They do a few books, but the churches kept getting fewer and fewer to support them, and then they basically went out of business, which is not a good trend for somebody who studies church membership trends, that they can't be supported. You'll notice in 2002, we had 2.4 million members, average Sunday attendance. What Alban Institute and a bunch of other people have said, probably a more accurate gauge of health is your average Sunday attendance. And that means if you have a Saturday night service, Sunday morning, say 3 services at Calvary, 3 o'clock service once a month called the camp service. What that is on Easter Sunday, the Sunday after Easter, middle of the summer, averaged out over a year, what would be your mean average Sunday attendance? Who knows what Calvary's ballpark or Sunday attendance is? 8, 9, 11. The figures, I've always been impressed how widely and wildly they vary what people think. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I heard Tom say 300. Anybody else? 400. How many does our building seat? Anybody know? For a wedding or a funeral, for 1,000. For Sunday morning, no way we sit that close to one another, but it's about 1,000. And on a normal Sunday, we have 25. Today was lower at 8, probably because of bad weather and cold, tends to be older. Usually 30 at 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock is about 100, and 11 o'clock is about 200. And does that count the choir? Yes, we always count the choir. 325 to 350 is a normal Sunday for us. In the summer, we don't drop that much. Most churches do. Why would you guess we don't drop that much in attendance in the summer? We get to go outside and have the garden service. It's a wonderful tradition here. Many churches just shut down, particularly those without air conditioning. So obviously Easter, we're way up. Sunday after Easter, let's say it gets 0 degrees and is windy and there's ice on the ground. Of course our attendance is down. Last time we had the service with camp a month ago, we had 450 people at church that day. Last week, because we had Evensong, the Vespers, with the Monteverdi's Vespers, we had 450 people here. Probably today it'll be about 300. So we're about 350 out of those average Sunday attendance there. We're basically, I went back and looked in the days, there's perceptions. Oh, do you remember when Sam Shoemaker was here? In the 1950s, everybody went to church in America, or that was the perception. What was our heyday in the Episcopal Church? Our highest membership ever. It was 1 year. We peaked. 1968. It's like, it was a good year in 68. We had 3.5 million members. What was the ballpark population of the United States at that time? 150, 175 million. I don't know that exactly. What's the ballpark population of the country today?
It's like 250 million.
It's much higher. So if we had just kept pace with the population, so if Episcopal Church had tracked with the average population of the country, we just have more people. But look at what happened even here. So we went from 68, 3.5 million, and we started doing this slow decline, and then this is the most recent figures available online that were easy to get. It's a gentle slope, and then it starts to drop faster. You could say oftentimes it happens in the health of an individual, a company, a business, a school. It's not doing well, and then when it gets really crisis, it drops faster. Notice what we're doing as an Episcopal Church. So when I came in, I was ordained a priest in 1996. We've got 2.4 million members, or at least that was the perception. This, by the way, includes the Episcopal Church in America, as well as what we call non-domestic dioceses, as in not in the United States of America. It includes Puerto Rico, Haiti, Cuba. It includes Europe. Europe gets counted in with us. They've added some, but about 20 congregations, Episcopal Church in Europe. There are a bunch of Church of England congregations. All told, there are about 150,000 people not in the United States that get included in those numbers. So you start looking at that, it's like, wait a second, we've dropped below, most recently we're below 2 million for the first time in 100 years. Is that very uplifting? Have any of you seen this or thought that it was happening?
What's typical of mainline churches?
That's a great point. Mainline churches, that's a term that's been around forever. Mainline churches refers to Protestant, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Methodist, not so much Baptist, but even the Baptist church has gone down some. Methodist Church had 10 million members not long ago, and they keep shrinking. Almost every one of those, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Episcopal, has an offshoot of a newer conservative branch. Anglican Church North America, Presbyterian Church of America, there's a Lutheran one, there's several Lutheran ones. And so we keep splitting in all these directions. You see this, it's not uplifting, but it's happening everywhere. But there are pockets of vitality and even pockets of growth. And they are in very predictable areas where they occur. I was starting to say earlier, I've looked back at our figures at Calvary, and I've read, we have such, is Bob Diltz or Becky here? We have, there's Bob, fantastic archives, and thanks to Bob, I got to see the parish profile, the narrative photo document that says, here's what we're looking for in a new priest, and here's how we describe ourselves. And if you go back to Harold Lewis, to Arthur McNulty, the attendance is almost identical going back 40 years. We've held our own. And I will argue, as have many clergy, if you can hold your own, as in terms of pledging, a number of pledges, membership, and so on, it is a great success story. In the 60s, if you just opened up an Episcopal church, particularly if you did it in a suburb, people flooded into that. That doesn't happen anymore. Now, who knows what happened to the Diocese of Pittsburgh? We got Duncanized. I've not heard that. That's excellent. Yes. So, now does anybody remember, I've obviously only heard this anecdotally, but I have now read it, that there were articles written about Pittsburgh, along with South Carolina and one or two others, was experiencing more growth, little caveat, adjusted for population, but we're growing more than anybody else. I have read those articles, and their articles go back into, I don't know, the year 2000, 2002. Look what we're doing in Pittsburgh, country and world. But then when you actually start looking at the figures, I do not see explosive growth in terms of Sunday attendance or membership. It's always important not to believe your own propaganda. But notice 2002, and again, this is all available online. There's a book called The Red Book, and it's actually red. Usually that's not the case. Green card's not been green forever. But the Red Book has all these facts and figures. So look how many parishes. That means a congregation, a parish, a mission, a church. We had 71, over 20,000 members, 8,400 in Sunday attendance, and it's ticking down slowly. And then the big year, between 2008 and 2009, we dropped to 28 congregations, to 2,400. So what's Calvary's membership? Anybody know? 1,600, what we report. I continue, it hasn't happened in a couple weeks, but Leslie has seen this happen. I'll be on the street and meet somebody, and, oh, you're Episcopalian, where are you? I'm a member of Calvary. Oh, you're the new rector. For a year. And it's all, we've been really busy, and, I've had work, and for a year. Okay. So we have 1,600 members. That doesn't mean there are actually 1,600 people involved. It means some of them have moved away and never transferred their membership. Some want to be married or buried here, but they never come. But it's probably a legitimate 1,400 people in some way are connected. I mean, legitimate connection. And so if we're 1,600 of that gets awfully high. And then you look at membership and then attendance. If we're 350, I see an economist here. Is that a healthy relationship? Here's another fun figure. The total giving by congregations to the Episcopal Diocese of Pittsburgh this year, anybody know? 450,000. Is that right, Bob? Pretty close? Pretty close. 450, 460. Anybody know what Calvary Church gives to the Diocese of Pittsburgh? 160,000. We're giving, happy to do it. It's based off 11% of your income. It's a fair number, actually lower than almost anywhere I've ever been before. But we're giving a third of all the asking to the diocese, that is from congregations. There is some endowment, so they have some other income, but we're giving a third. If one family gave a third of the income at Calvary Church, I would be really, really attentive. I treat everybody the same, but if you gave a third, you would have more of the same than others. That's not the best situation for the diocese. It speaks, we are, relatively speaking, incredibly healthy congregation across the board, except we don't have as much money as we'd like. A pipe broke today. Well, we only had one pipe break all winter. I call that a win. We'll fix it. But the buildings are in good shape, all those things. We just don't have as much as we'd like. That is not the case with most of the other congregations. If you go down, you see, 28 congregations left after the split. Notice, where did we get 37 as of last year? I think it's actually probably 38 now. Where did they come from? Did we plant a new congregation somewhere? No. Notice, so we went up 8 or 9, or 10 of new congregations since then. Notice, however, what our attendance did from 2,481 to, we lost people. Membership from 8,600, we gained a few people. Probably that's 3 congregations worth. How do we have 8 or 9 or 10 more congregations than we used to, the same number of people? What happened? Anybody know?
Population gets older.
But we got 10 new ones. Duncanites came back. And in a couple cases, Leslie helped me with this, Hazelwood, that church came back, 18 people at congregation there. Another one, St. James, Penn Hills, that was an empty building, and we got a grant, and we have a priest there. They now have 18 people. What are the other ones? St. David's Peters Township, an empty building. A great guy, Chris McInnes, went there to restart that congregation. Monongahela, didn't that come back? Didn't Denora come back, or was that right about the time? Those are 12, 15 people total in each one of these. So you think we took on 8 or 9 or 10 old buildings that haven't been taken care of in years, and we've got that. It's challenging. So Dorsey McConnell, I think, is a great bishop, a great person. He has a really, really hard job, and I think he's doing a very good job. But you see where we are. 20, 30 years ago, that would not have been considered a viable diocese. It still is. Who knows, any chance, so if we're 1,600 members, 350 on a Sunday, where are all the other congregations? I'll tell you, this is not a judgment of is it good or bad. It's in terms of how many people they've got. St. Paul's, Mount Lebanon, very healthy, pretty good-sized congregation. Christ Church, North Hills, about a $400,000 pledge level, 250 or so on Sunday. That's a pretty solid congregation. After that, you look at St. Andrew's Highland Park, a little under 300,000 in pledging, 125 on Sunday. St. Peter's in Brentwood, St. Brendan's Franklin Park. There is St. Mark's in Crafton. That's below that level, isn't it? Trinity Cathedral. I love cathedrals. This makes me very sad. What's happened there? 20, 30, 40 people on a Sunday. So they are experiencing challenging times. Part of all this is to say, our leadership role has been very significant in Pittsburgh to preserve identity and heritage, and also, frankly, buildings and money. Very important. I think Calvary can have a significant role of leadership in the future with helping to rebuild what a diocese is, what the church is in Pittsburgh. Any other thoughts about these numbers? Karen.
I have a question. Is there any sense that we might get merged with another adjacent diocese? Because it does seem like it's it's a slightly different question.
It's a very legitimate question. So is there a chance?
Any chance that we would get merged with an adjacent diocese? There
are 5 Episcopal dioceses in Pennsylvania. That's probably 3 too many. A lot of dioceses, I'll get to it in a minute, but a lot of the congregations were founded 100 years ago. And there was a big wave. What year was Calvary founded? 1855. That was that was early. Kind of 1880 to 1910 was a whole bunch of congregations. Railroad went places, later car went places. In the mid-50s to the late 60s, when that peak year, the best way to grow a diocese is to found new congregations. That's historically been the case. So a whole bunch were in the 50s. And so in those two times in particular, well, we have a church here and a church here, let's split and form a new diocese. One place I know quite well, Kansas, has 2 dioceses. They were trying to be 3 at one point, and that is completely ridiculous. Even though it's a huge state, there is no way to support that. It happens all over the place. Texas, they just do things big in Texas, and they got a lot of people. That makes some sense. We have Northwest Pennsylvania, which is Erie. There is Bethlehem. There is, what's the other, Central Pennsylvania? And the Diocese of Pennsylvania is Philadelphia, that end. Probably, this is again not a value judgment, I'm not working towards this. Probably there ought to be 2 at each end of the state, but it doesn't happen easily. Not too long ago, a little diocese outside of Chicago with a quarter of the size of this, I mean, maybe 1,000 or 2 members said, maybe it's time we should merge with Chicago. And you have to have a vote by the convention after the bishop and their version of the standing committee and council of trustees. Everybody's got to vote on it. Everybody's got to agree to it. And then it goes to the convention of both dioceses. And that is a lot of work to do. Who would we link up with? Probably.
Where they came from.
Bethlehem and Erie are sharing a bishop now.
Bethlehem and Erie are sharing a bishop. And he has to kind of jump over. I think he flies or drives. But it's a strange setup. There has been talk that this is just what I think will likely happen in the long term. There will be far fewer dioceses in the Episcopal Church. It's the right thing to happen, but it's going to be painful in a lot of ways. California should probably be 2, north and south. Texas will probably be 3 or 4. New York will go to a couple. We'll go to a couple. But it's going to take a long time to get there, because a crucial part of not having a diocese anymore, merging, means whoever is already bishop there's not going to be another bishop. And some people this is a value statement. If you want to be bishop, you really, really want to be bishop. And you want to be bishop of something rather than nothing. And if something is a little of something, you'll still do it. And so people have to vote themselves out of office. I don't see that happen in anything very often. So that will be a huge roadblock. What will eventually happen, I believe, is the finances will get so tight, the distance is so large. I think they're going to be, and I've thought this as have other people for a long time, there will be places like Calvary in many parts of the country, a strong regional church. There'll be a strong church in the North Hills and the South Hills and various places, and it's going to be like that all over the country. And then lots of little preaching stations, which is actually very present in our history. That happened before in parts of the Middle Ages. There was a monastery, there was a cathedral, and then little congregations around. I think it will largely be like that again. It's very likely, and it's not my idea, but I think it's right, many places, what will happen before they merge is bishops will become the deans of the cathedral, or they will become the rector of a big church. And it used to be that way a long time ago. It prolongs that system longer than it probably needs to be. One could make the case, why do we have diocese by geography anymore? It was based off that's a very fundamental question that blows people's mind, because this is what it means to have a church. No, it doesn't. It's how far you could ride on a horse. That's what a parish was. A parish was a geographical area usually people could get to. Virginia has them all over the place, why they started their congregations, and that doesn't apply anymore. I know one bishop saying, I had to drive 2 hours to go make this visitation. I said, I read a lot of stories a guy rode a canoe, or he walked, or stagecoach. And Jackson Kemper had the entire Louisiana Purchase he looked after. And he did a lot of stuff. Sir, you're in your air-conditioned all-wheel drive car for 2 hours? And I know it was a Motel 6, but at least you got to stay in a bed and all that. So some of those expectations have to change about how we will do that. Probably it'll go through stages before it gets where it needs to be. People have been arguing, a guy named Lyle Schaller, for affinity dioceses, like-minded places rather than geography. We already have that at Calvary. We call it the Consortium of Endowed Parishes. It's other churches, generally speaking, like us in our situation, that we can share ideas with. So that was a great question. Any other things before we move on? Yes, sir.
With respect to the figures on the screen about this diocese, the $64 question would seem to be, if you added in attendance at the breakaway parishes, what would that be at the end of at the bottom?
Well, what would you guess it would be? They're looking at the figures, and it's not exact, but I'm pretty close. There are 3 big ones: St. Stephen's Swickley, Ascension Oakland, and Fox Chapel. There are some others, decent size, but it's also lots of smaller places in the valley or elsewhere. If you added those 3 in terms of money and people, I think you'd hit closer. You add in all the other ones. I think it'd be a little bit less than that if you added them all back. The 7,193. Is that fair to say, Leslie? If you added them all back, I don't think they've grown very much.
I think what I understood was at the time of the split, we had a third of the congregations, but half of the people left in the Episcopal Diocese. So if the other folks came back, it would take us back to.
Well, that's about what that says. The disturbing thing is we've gone to a little bit less than half in the split in terms of members.
Mm-hmm.
Average Sunday attendance dropped to about a third of what it was before. I don't understand that.
Well, it's a great point. Now, this room, what would you say the average age is in here? Everybody shaves off 10 years.
Let's just say you teach and shame are bringing it down.
Well done, Leslie. But if you look, we have some people of riper years, as the old prayer book said. Some of those seniors, but at Calvary we also have some young people and various ages. That's actually not the case most congregations. The 2 other ones like us would be St. Paul's Mount Lebanon and Christ Church North Hills, with some type of youth group. Do you know how many congregations in Pittsburgh have a young adults group? 1. Calvary Church, thanks to TJ's leadership and a lot of other people. And I'm looking at somebody who keeps being invited to young adults. There's not a hard and fast top age on that. Mark, Rust. So 30-ish. But that range is there. But if you look at most congregations, and this is not just in Pittsburgh, it's everywhere. If you took just a wild shot in the dark without knowing anything, If there are 12 people in Donora, 15 in Monongahela, and you just start going through the list, what would you guess the average age is there? 70-ish. And that's the way it is across the country. So these numbers, without new people and new young people, it's going to keep dropping just because of mortality rates. And so those congregations, without doing anything, are likely not to exist in 10 years unless something changes. I don't mean to be depressing, that's just simply the way it is. And that's part of what I mean is Calvary has such a significant role because we actually have people and energy and are engaged with the community, and we're growing again, and there's all this stuff going on. That is not the case most places.
What about churches like Orchard Hill that have, 1,200 people at a session?
I'm sorry, where's that?
Orchard Hill, Wexford.
There are, in the grand scheme of Christianity, it's a relatively new phenomenon. What are places like that or non-denominational churches? There are very few large congregations that are Episcopal, Lutheran, Methodist. I mean, there are some, but most of they get the term mega churches that have like 1,000 people or more on a Sunday. To my knowledge, there are 2 or 3 Episcopal congregations that big. National Cathedral is one. There was one in Texas, St. Martin's, Houston, maybe St. Paul's, Atlanta. That you're right.
That used to be Episcopal, it started that.
It used to be those. So I don't know the answer to that. There are other big congregations. Often, what happens is they're started by a charismatic leader. They grow and grow and grow, and one guy said, I could sell igloos to Eskimos, is how he, wow, that's your way of presenting the gospel. And so they grow and grow and grow, and what almost inevitably happens when there's a change in leadership, they are severely diminished at best and cease to exist more often. What we have, at least to a degree, is stability. It doesn't matter who the priest is. That has an effect, but it's the people, it's the history, it's the traditions, the customs, and so on. Mary Lou?
I think it's interesting to point out that because they are non-denominational, you have 1,000 people, you get Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopalians. You don't have to belong to anything to belong to that. They essentially are on the distribution rates for anybody whose parish is closed, the parish switches to a different culture or philosophy or whatever. And so they're there to pick up everybody else that doesn't want to go somewhere else that is looking to something. I think it's a lot.
There are lots and lots of those around the country. Almost invariably, they are in new-ish suburbs, and they have gigantic parking lots. Their neighbors often hate them because they don't pay taxes and take up a lot of space and use water and have traffic and so on. But there are those there, but unfortunately, those are even wavering too. The average, I'll talk about some of this in the next two. These 3 classes together in a row are linked, at least how I'm presenting them and how in my mind. People, the younger you are in the United States, the less likely you are by far to have any religious formation whatsoever. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, anything. The older you are, generally speaking, the more likely you are to have been brought up in a church. And there's an interesting curve there. Oldest generation brought up in churches, the youngest generation, they didn't leave anything. Baby boomers were the pivotal generation where they left for a variety of reasons. I didn't grow up in a church. I went a little bit when I was in 8th and 9th grade, but I didn't have all that. There was nothing to rebel against. Younger people, it's even weird to me. I grew up in enough of a culturally religious environment. The question was not, do you go to church? It was where. And the question now is, well, not even do you go to church? It's a rare thing. It's fascinating to see, and I first encountered this 20 years ago in Washington, D.C., and it's more like their head in many ways. Two women were standing, it was in an art gallery in D.C., looking at this painting, and there was a big tree, and there was a scantily clad woman and a scantily clad man, and there was a snake, and there was an apple, and they said, "What do you suppose that is?" And they were looking, and it was like these were well-dressed, well-groomed. Culturally, they ought to, like, have you never done a crossword puzzle? Or, but, by the way, four-letter word for OT prophet, it's always Amos. There's a free one today. Adam and Eve in the garden. And younger, they were middle-aged. Nowadays, a lot of people have never heard any of the stories. I don't know what you experience in young adults group. They may have heard a little bit about Jesus, but then you start reading some of the Old Testament. It's like, what is this? And what do you mean about a flood? And what's the garden? And big foundational stories, they're just gone from the cultural identity. We don't grow up. I still have the Ten Commandments in my classrooms when I was a kid. They all disappeared by the time I was in high school. There was the Lord's Prayer, 10 Commandments, all gone. That's totally gone everywhere for some good and some not some good reasons. So that's just not there. People aren't going to just show up. They're going to be looking for something, and I think Calvary has what a lot of people are looking for. So this is a 2014 survey. You have it's a 6-page document. It was done in 2010. I have that as well. And it's usually done every 4 years. It's a little spotty. But there's a guy, Kirk Hadaway, that works for the National Episcopal Church, who collects all this data. It is data from what is called the Annual Parochial Report, which is just that. It's an annual report, self-report by congregations. What was your attendance, pledging, who are your vestry members, what do you do, what do you not do, and so on. And especially looking at this over the years, and Kirk does a pretty good job at doing a simple explanation of interpreting the data. And so this is done for every church in the country. And look what he found out. The largest proportion, 59% of Episcopal congregations, can be found in villages, towns, and cities. Overall, 31% are located in villages or towns of 10,000 persons or fewer. So we got quite a few a third are in small towns. And then 28% are in larger towns or small cities. The biggest congregations, and this is by far across the country, are in big cities. And they're either in places like Calvary, kind of in the city, or they're in the new developing subdivision and they're newer. Texas has them all. If you want to plant a church in Texas, go to the farthest field out and put it, and then they just keep adding in Dallas and to a lesser degree in Houston. So there. You'll see some of this. A majority, 53% of Episcopal parishes and missions, what I was talking about before, were founded before 1900. The post-war baby boom years, 46 to 65, saw a huge rise in church development. As many parishes, 18% of all congregations were founded post-war baby boom. As we were developing suburbs all the country, everybody started driving, expanding, come back from the war. That was very natural. And at the same time that those new ones were being developed, the older ones like Calvary were flourishing. Only 3% of Episcopal congregations were founded in the last 20 years. Does that seem strange to you? We stopped doing it. Unfortunately, when we plant a congregation, most of the time, they fail. And we don't, I think there are a variety of reasons for that. Fail is in they're not self-sustaining. And we either pull the plug on them, or we don't have the right leadership, or we don't set them up to succeed. We got a building. And this is nobody's fault, but it's happening in Pittsburgh. Well, we got these empty buildings. Let's put somebody in there and see what happens. What do you think's going to happen? probably not going to make it. So the typical median church seats 192 persons in worship. That means the building seats just under 200 people. There's an old rule: you will never get more than 80% of people in your building than your seating capacity allows. If your building seats 200, you'll get 160 max on a normal Sunday. Building that seats 1,000, we're good. The chapel is what amazes me, because the chapel seats 30, and at 8 o'clock, we normally have 30 or 35 people. They sit down in the baptismal font. That should not be happening. But it also means it cannot grow at all. I don't know what to do about that. Maybe we'll say it's great for what it is. But a lot of these places, 1 in 5 churches seats 100 or fewer. It was built to be small. Over half Episcopal congregations, 58%, are small family-sized, and I'll talk about that next week. There's a way of looking at churches that you describe them by their average Sunday attendance. And you mentioned mainline congregations. It is remarkable to look at Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterian. You can predict how they behave by their size. And so he's talking about a specific thing. Those that have 75 people or fewer, that's normal for us in the Episcopal Church. If you think about our diocese, those I mentioned, Calvary, Christ Church, St. Paul's, and so on, you take out those top 10, the average attendance is about 25 on a Sunday. So we're right there. Median Episcopal parish had 61 persons at Sunday worship. Notice it was down from 66 in 2009, and 2003 was 77. What's happening? They're leaving or dying. Those are the two options, exactly. More the latter would be my guess. The largest proportion of Episcopal congregations, 45%, offer a single worship service each weekend. That used not to be the case. So just under half of congregations have a single service, and also what happens, they have a very part-time priest shows up and does this. Many others, 38%, have 2 services. That's generally your 8 and 10. And if you want to get a big fight, change the service time to 10:15 or 10:30. It's those two, there's some type of Christian ed between them, some type of coffee hour after each one. Many places, Rite 1 is the early service, Rite 2 is the later service. The family one, as in we don't want kids at the early, it's pretty typical across the country. Here's what's most interesting to me. While only 13% have 3 services, so that's mostly us, except today we have 4, and when we have evensong, and when we have a concert. 3% have 4 services. Among congregations with a single worship service, less than 1 in 4 indicate the service is more than half full. So they have 1 service, and only a quarter of them are even half full. People coming to church to come to evensong or vespers, where we pray, I wouldn't count that as a service. If we're praying during the thing. But that's a good question. Now, I'll skip. I'm about to run out of time. Majorities of congregations report that worship often or always includes Eucharist. Does anybody remember when Eucharist was done once a month? When did it change? I love we still use that adjective. It's new from 1979. They start new and improved prayer book from 1979. So Eucharist became, and the very clear, deliberate word chosen in the prayer book is that Holy Eucharist shall be the principal service on Sundays. And the principal service before most places was what? Morning prayer, choral morning prayer. What happened is what was supposed to be the principal, that is, the main one on a Sunday, became almost the only one. So instead of the intention was for us, 11 o'clock would have been Eucharist, 8 and 9 would have been morning prayer. That's what they set out to do originally, but of course lots of things take on a life of their own, and it turns out so many people liked Eucharist, that's what happened almost all the time everywhere, which is perfectly fine. 87% have organ music, pretty standard. Kneeling by the congregation, 73% of people still kneel. So it's good we haven't let go of everything. Is it perfectly fine to stand for the prayers? Yes. Some people would like to kneel. Here's another thing I find interesting. Only a small minority of churches report that worship often or always includes acoustic instruments. Would you just die if we did guitars at Calvary Church? We're actually doing them at 3 o'clock today in here. But organ music is appropriate at the Sunday morning services. That's part of my point of our role of leadership. In the fall, we're going to start a new service. We won't change Sunday morning. Don't worry about that. 3 o'clock will be the camp service once a month. In the fall, there will be a Eucharistic-based service on Sunday nights at 5. You'll start hearing a lot more about that. It's an alternative in a variety of ways. We've got a grant. Alan Lewis got $100,000 for us to do it, to start it. We'll be doing, I think, legitimately and authentically, our 3 morning services done extremely well. And then we'll have a camp service with guitars. And then on Sunday nights, a chanted service. But that fits at Calvary. We can do that, and I don't know, there are only a handful of other places that could do such a thing, that it wouldn't be crazy to have people fighting. But here, it actually works. Congregations were most likely to say the following descriptors characterize their worship services very well. Fun and joyful, 28%. Oh, we're going to church again today. The other 75% said that, and 28%, oh, it's fun and joyful. Filled with a sense of God presence, 36%. So that would be the half full of God's presence group probably there. Vibrant and engaging, thought-provoking, reverent. So, does that not strike you as, is there any correlation? It's not thought-provoking, it's not joyful, it's not, now, I'm not saying we should jump up and down and cheer, yay Jesus, at all, but are you glad to be there? And looking at that, 65, 70% of churches, am I reading that right? Who just said that? Jim, say that louder. Bad product. In one sense, I don't talk like this a lot, but church is church. It's not a business, but it should be operated in the business side like a business. But what we're doing is, in many people's minds, because we're completely in a culture that is taught from the day we're born to be consumers, and so they view, if you're new, I'm church shopping. And they use the term, I'm looking for what fits my needs. Is there something for my kids? Is it a convenient time? Is there parking? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? That's how a lot of people think. You can be upset at it or just realize it's the way it is for most people in America. And so our product is not meeting the perceived needs of the potential group. It's meeting some needs. Well said. That's the people that go to church. That's right. This food is cold and not very good, but I guess I'll keep eating it until, let's see. The median Episcopal congregation had 152 active members, down from 182. Here's a fun figure. Women comprise 60% of the average Episcopal congregation. In a smaller church, I'm sorry, one of our parishioners was raising the roof on that one. 60% in smaller, as in fewer people, they generally are more. A majority of Episcopalians, not a huge shocker, are white, European, 86%. And then you see 6% black, 3.5% Latino. Generally what happens is most Episcopal churches are majority white, and by majority I mean 99.9%. And there is usually a black Episcopal church, and if it's a really big city, there are 2 or 3. And then there's a Latino church or 2, particularly in California, Texas, but growing increasingly elsewhere. And the one place still in the Episcopal Church that is not well integrated racially is on a Sunday morning at worship. There are a variety of things people have tried to do, but it just hasn't happened yet for perhaps a lot of reasons. A large majority, 73% of Episcopal congregations report that half their members are age 50 plus. 27% report that more than half their members are age 65 or older. What is the future like for them? Not good. We're also older than the congregation and population, so on. What could Calvary do? What could be our role? And next time, I'll talk about this more specifically. Don't be depressed, please. It's not over yet. I think we have an amazing gift here at this congregation that we can increasingly share with the larger church and the diocese. Any last questions before we go?
I just want to say, when Calvary was founded, the committee that was getting together to form this, they traveled to see the bishop in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That was Matilda Dallas Wilkins?
Yes. Yep.
Traveled in 54, 55 to go see the bishop in Philadelphia. We'd like to start a new congregation in East Liberty. And his answer, of course, was no. Thank you for sharing your opinions, sir. Then we'll just do it ourselves. And so Matilda, being a woman, couldn't be on the vestry. This is anecdotal. Did she just pick 12 men to become the vestry, or there was...
They were a group from, I don't know where they came from.
Around, and they met at the local drugstore.
But because it was too far to go to wherever it was.
Yeah.
That's why they wanted to.
So our draw, by the way, is if you're in the valley, in the two churches in Ora and Monongahela are not very far apart. You could go to either one. That's in a sense, it will make some sense for us. When I did those 27 neighborhood gatherings, I didn't just stay in Shady Side the whole time. In fact, it was not very much. Quite a bit in Squirrel Hill. I see Gibsonia, Squirrel Hill. I didn't go to New Wilmington. We have people there. A few on the south side. You go to Murraysville, Monroeville. People drive from all over. We are a regional church in that sense for the whole city, the whole metro area. That's who we'll keep getting in the future. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be there in 4 minutes. Thank you all very much.